It's time to talk about the defending champions, the Denver Nuggets. And I think everyone's question with the Denver Nuggets is this, and it's very simple. Can they win another championship? Can they become a dynasty? And my simple answer, and this is just the simple version, is yes. They can remain relevant. They can win championships. They can potentially become a dynasty as long as they have one player, and that's Nikola Jokic. But there are a lot of other factors, including Jamal Murray, who's a great piece to their team. He's going to be influencing them a lot throughout his course of his career. So I'd say those two players. As long as they got those two players, and specifically Nikola Jokic, they're going to be winning for a while. But let's dive a little deeper into their roster, their salaries, coaching, and all that good stuff. Looking back at their team from their last year, their championship season, they lost one major guy. They lost Bruce Brown. And then they lost Thomas Bryant. They lost Ish Smith. And they lost Jeff Green, who also played a very important role for the Denver Nuggets in the playoffs and in their championship series. So for the Denver Nuggets, not having Bruce Brown Jr. or having Jeff Green are going to be big hits. Thomas Bryant didn't really play at all. Ish Smith played little to none. So I don't think they're going to be worried about those two, but Bruce Brown and Jeff Green are definitely going to be big hits for them. But lucky for the Denver Nuggets, they got some players who didn't really play last year who can definitely have a bigger role this year, and they got some young players who can definitely who've probably developed and will develop as the season goes on next year as they're more instrumental into the offense and the defense, just getting more minutes overall. Christian Brown, I would imagine he gets a much bigger role with Bruce Brown gone. He's probably going to fill that role for Bruce Brown. Reggie Jackson, I would bet that we're going to see more of Reggie Jackson initiated into the Denver offense. They got some young guys. They got Julian Strawther and Jalen Pickett, who they picked up this year in the draft. They got Peyton Watson, who played little to none last year, who definitely has some potential. So as I was saying, with Bruce Brown being a big hit, I don't think the Denver Nuggets are they're definitely upset about Bruce Brown being gone, but they definitely have some other pieces that they got in their hand. They definitely got some cards in their hand that they haven't used very much yet, and that could definitely be a help to their team. And those guys are just bench/role players. You got Nikola Jokic for 5 more years. You got Jamal Murray, who he only has 2 years left in his contract, but I doubt he's going to go anywhere else, especially if the Denver Nuggets keep playing as they are. Michael Porter Jr. is under contract for 4 more years. He has looked great the past 2 years. He was just an absolute steal of where they got him in his draft. Aaron Gordon was huge for them last year, and he's under contract for another 3 years. Condavious Caldwell-Pope, like I said, Reggie Jackson, Christian Brown. They still have DeAndre Ayton and Justin Holiday under contract for this year at least. So they definitely have the team that can win another championship. It's just, will they? And realistically, with how they match up with other teams, I think there's only 3 teams. 3 teams that could potentially beat them, and 1 team that might, who has a better odds than the other 2 in that 3 that I talked about. First is the Boston Celtics. They have Jason Tatum. They have Jaylen Brown. They have Robert Williams. They have Al Horford. They have Kristaps Porzingis now. They have Derek White. They have a stacked team. But Nikola Jokic is a big mismatch for them because they don't have a perennial all-star type center. But I would imagine the Boston Celtics could still give them trouble. They would only meet in the finals, so the Denver Nuggets could still have luck of who they face in the finals because, the Boston Celtics would have to beat 3 other teams in a best-of-7 series. Same with the Milwaukee Bucks. That's the second team I think could possibly beat them if they made it to the finals. And then the team that could meet them a little earlier on in the playoffs is the Phoenix Suns. The Phoenix Suns is the team that I think could possibly beat them, especially with the talent that they have. If they get on fire, then there's nothing that the Nuggets would be able to do. But the Nuggets played them last year, went to 6. Obviously, they didn't have Bradley Beal, but I think they had a better team overall. They had Chris Paul, they had some other role player guys. But I made a video on the Suns the other day talking about how They probably have the second best odds compared to the Denver Nuggets. But those realistically for me are the three teams I think could beat the Denver Nuggets in a best of 7 series. I still have the Nuggets at number 1, specifically because of Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. I mean, let me just go over Nikola Jokic stats from the past 3 years. For the past 3 years, he's averaged 25 points per game, about 10 rebounds, and about 10 assists. He's basically averaged a triple-double. Well, that was last year he averaged practically a triple-double. He averaged 9.8 assists. Very close. I mean, he was second in MVP voting. You could argue that he should have got MVP. And then in the playoffs, he took his level to a whole other game, which I don't think people thought were possible. I mean, he brought his rebounding numbers up. His assist numbers went a little down, but that's because he was scoring way more. He was scoring 30 points per game. And he was playing 40 minutes a game as well. That's a 6-minute difference of what he was playing in the regular season. Nikola Jokic is one of the best, or if not the best player in the NBA right now. And if you have that player, there's no reason you can't win an NBA championship. And then you got Nikola Jokic's Robin, so to speak. If Nikola Jokic is Batman, you got Jamal Murray, who averaged 20 points per game last year, 6 assists, 4 rebounds. He was just coming off of his ACL injury. It was his first season back from his ACL injury. He played no prior games to this season prior to his ACL injury. And he averaged 20 points per game. I mean, he was going to be a little rusty. And he comes back right away and he elevates his team to a championship level. And he's only 25 years old. He's 25 years. Jamal Murray's only 25 years old. I have no doubt that Jamal Murray's an all-star type player. When it comes to the playoffs, Jamal Murray just gets on a whole other level. We realized this the moment the bubble happened. I mean, he jumped from 20 points per game to 26 points per game. He elevated his rebounds to 5.7. He elevated his assists to 7.1. And Jamal Murray, he doesn't slack on defense either. He doesn't slack at all on defense whatsoever. So if you got Jamal Murray, who could definitely be an all-star player any year he's playing, I am willing to bet that he will be an all-star player next year. Because I think he's just going to have a newfound confidence and all of that. And then you have Nikola Jokic, who can be MVP and the best player in the league any given year. It's just a recipe for success. Who's going to stop that? I mean, last year, first round, they beat the Timberwolves 4-1. Second round, they beat the Suns 4-2. Conference finals, they play the Lakers, sweep them. They sweep them. Lakers didn't stand a chance. And then you go into the finals, and they beat the Heat 4-1. They beat the Heat 4-1. And some may attribute their success in the playoffs last year to luck, because in the finals they played the 8th seed Heat. But that 8th seed Heat beat the Celtics, they beat the Bucks. And those were the two teams that I said could beat the Nuggets potentially in the playoffs next year. So I mean, if the Celtics and the Bucks are already struggling with teams other than the Nuggets, do they really stand a chance? That's why I'm saying the Suns, they're probably the only team that's got a chance, and they're in the West, so it'll be a little more difficult for the Nuggets. And then you had Michael Porter Jr., who could also be an all-star. The Denver Nuggets have got 4 players on the team that could be all-stars. But let's talk about Michael Porter Jr. right now. He's coming off a season where he only played 9 games. He's been injury-ridden for a lot of his career. His second full year in the league, he averaged 19 points per game. This past season, he averaged 17.4. But he also had a smaller role. So averaging 17.4 is amazing. He shot 42% from 3. Amazing field goal percentage. He's not going to be the player that fills up the stat sheet at all. He's a pretty good rebounding player. So that helps him tremendously. He averages about like 6 rebounds per game. He's got the perception of not being able to pass, which is kind of true. He averages 1 assist a game, perfectly 1 assist. He's like athletic. He can hold his own on defense sometimes. Not the best defender, I would say, but he's also very young. He's 24 years old. He can torch you any given night if he gets hot. If Michael Porter Jr. gets hot, he can easily give you a 30 ball any given night. And I don't think that's going to go anywhere, especially after a championship season. I think it's just only going to make that player better. Last player I'll cover for the Denver Nuggets is Aaron Gordon. This guy is the 4th player that could potentially be an all-star. I mean, it's less so. He doesn't really get that close to 20 points per game, which you kind of need to be an all-star. But he does everything you want. He averaged 16 points per game last season, and he's the fourth option. He's the 4th option. He's getting 16 points per game. He definitely benefits from Nikola Jokic on his team. I mean, if you watch the Denver Nuggets last season, it was just full of Nikola Jokic at the top of the key and then Aaron Gordon doing a back cut or something for either a lob or just a beautiful bounce pass from Nikola Jokic, and then Aaron Gordon dunking it. Like, Aaron Gordon, I think, found his role perfectly with the Denver Nuggets last year. Every play, it's like if he has a mismatch, he's going down low. And you're going to get a mismatch for the Denver Nuggets with just how their offense facilitates and how well coached they are. You're going to get a mismatch. And if Aaron Gordon has a mismatch, if he's got a smaller guy on him, there's no doubt he's going to be posting up in the paint, and Nikola Jokic is going to find him perfectly, and he's going to score every time because that's what Aaron Gordon does. He's a post player. And if for some reason you need like a bailout 3, Aaron Gordon ain't horrible. I mean, he shot 35% from 3 last year. I mean, he only shot 2 per game, but I mean, he's versatile, and he's one of the most athletic players in the NBA. One of the most athletic players in the NBA. So he can get you some blocks some nights. He's definitely going to poster some guys throughout the season. He's definitely that hype guy for an offensive play. And just every player knows their role so well on the Denver Nuggets. And that's why Nikola Jokic is so lethal. Like, if Nikola Jokic was on a super young team that just didn't know how to flow with an offense, the coach just didn't have that game plan, and I'll get to Michael Malone in a bit. But if Nikola Jokic didn't have that type of team, he'd probably be so much worse. But everybody knows their role on the Denver Nuggets, and Nikola Jokic can find them every single time. That's why he averages 10 assists a game. He's one of the best passers in the NBA, if not the best. And then if Nikola Jokic doesn't find a player to pass to, oh, there he is. He's doing a one-legged fadeaway on the 3 at half court, and he's draining that. And you're going to look at him and be like, what is he doing? And he's going to have no expression on his face because he knew that was going in. I mean, this is Nikola's day job. Everybody knows that. So they have the team. They have the core players that won them the championship last year. So there's no reason they can do it again. They can't do it again. And they have all 4 of those players for like a couple more years. So why not create a dynasty? I mean, everybody says to create a dynasty, you need to win 3. And I think that's perfectly reasonable to assume that the Denver Nuggets can. Especially that they did it last year. They know how to do it now. Everybody every year was always dogging on the Nuggets because, they can't get past the Western Conference Finals. They can't win these important series. But they proved everybody wrong last year. And they won it easily. They won the NBA Finals last year easily, without breaking a sweat. I mean, the next 2 years are going to be a lot more difficult, especially with the Suns just getting so much talent on their team, and then every other team getting a lot better, and then you're going to have players who are going to want to be traded or something, and they're going to want higher contracts. You're not going to be able to give it to them. But they got their core 4 players, and that core, they can win you a series. They can win you a series. And now it's time to talk about Michael Malone. He's the Denver Nuggets head coach. He's been in that position for he's been there since 2015, 2016 season. I don't really want to do the math on that. But every season he's been with the Denver Nuggets. They haven't been worse than the 5th seed. Past 5 years, they've either been the 1 or the 2 seed. And bear in mind, the Denver Nuggets for those past 5 years have been very injury prone. I mean, Jamal Murray's had his fair share of injuries. Michael Porter Jr.'s had his fair share of injuries. They just haven't had the best of luck until last year with injuries. And he's just an amazing coach. I mean, he's been in the Coach of the Year voting a couple times. In 2018, 2019, he was third in the voting. A very underrated coach, mind you. You would think being the number 1 seed 3 times, the number 2 seed two times in the West, which is always has been considered the best conference for the past couple of years. You would think that having those stats, you would be the Coach of the Year at some point. You would think last year they were the number 1 seed, that he would be in consideration for Coach of the Year. He was 5th. I mean, he's a much better coach than his accolades, I guess, would say. I mean, he's probably going to get into the conversations now that he's won an NBA championship, now that he's on people's radar. But Michael Malone has done a tremendous job with the Denver Nuggets. I mean, you could say he took a risk in giving Nikola Jokic such a big role. I mean, Nikola Jokic was a second-round pick. No one had an eye on him. No one really knew about him. I mean, Michael Malone brought him to that status of all-star player. He didn't want to trade away Jamal Murray when he was injured. He easily could have done that. He took a chance on Michael Porter Jr. as well. I mean, you could attribute these things to the front office as well. I mean, the general manager and the owner and stuff like that. But a lot of that goes on Michael Malone, the head coach, because he's the one who's actually playing with these guys. He's making the offense. He's making the defense. He's doing all of the important things. And he does the thing that doesn't really show up on paper, because, I mean, if you look at the Denver Nuggets from last season, they were 5th in offensive rating, which is very good. Being top 5 in offensive rating is just tremendous. But they were 15th in defensive rating last year. I mean, they were 23rd in pace. They're a very slow team. Nikola Jokic isn't going to be racing up and down the court as fast as De'Aaron Fox. Opponents' points per game, they were 8th. Points per game, they were 12th. So they weren't really top 5 in anything besides offensive rating. Yet, they still managed to win an NBA championship. Overall, this team is amazing. I think they're going to be the number 1 seed in the West again. Michael Malone, potentially head coach of the year. Nikola Jokic is going to be top 3 MVP voting like he is for the past 3-4 years. Jamal Murray is going to have an all-star season. And the Denver Nuggets are my pick right now. Mind you, injuries can happen. A lot of stuff can happen during the season. Maybe a player isn't going to play as near as they did last year. Who knows? But from what I've seen from last year, and all the things that happened in the off season this year, or lack of, that's happened to their team, there's no reason they shouldn't be the favorites. And right now, they're my favorites to win the NBA championship. Right now.